All right, let's welcome a special guest to Straight Fire, first timer. Anytime we get a real hooper, a guy who actually plays, you got to do it. And oh, by the way, he wrote a book on Luka Doncic, the Wonder Boy, Luka Doncic, and the Curse of Greatness. Tim MacMahon, how are you, man?
Howdy, partner. I did write a book. That is true. Real Hooper is a bit of a stretch.
Okay.
I get out there and kind of trot up and down the court every once in a while, but what I'm doing at this age ain't real hooping, that's for sure.
Okay. Well, if there's a media game out here for if the Clippers survive the Nuggets,
There will be.
Dave McMenamin gets in the game. Hey, you guys need a 10th. I'm in. I'll just show up anytime.
Well,
Just
listen,
fire from deep. It's fun.
yeah, McMenamin is kind of like the Lakers. Not a lot of defense there.
Ooh, ouch. We'll get to the Lakers collapse, obviously, but I'm curious about the book. I did see a funny recap that essentially you had finished the
Yeah.
book and then the trade happens. What do you remember where you were, obviously, when that went down?
Yeah, I was in Cleveland. I'd actually had traveled from San Francisco to Cleveland, so I was meeting the Mavericks on that part of the road trip. And so I just happened to be in the right spot, but I was just about to go to bed. It was a little bit after midnight in Cleveland. And yeah, sure enough, my life changed just a little bit there. And yeah, so the first print run had already happened. Obviously, I'm reporting that night, we're recording an emergency podcast on Sports Center, all those kind of things. But within the first hour and a half or so, I'd emailed people with the publishing company and my book agent basically said, "Hey, we got to talk. We got to figure something out." And I was able to write a final chapter explaining it just how the hell they went from, because the whole book's about the pressure on a franchise when you draft a prodigy and build it, or you're putting yourself in danger of losing them, right? They managed to make their way through all that despite all kinds of crazy missteps and just chaos and drama and dysfunction in the organization. They went to the finals and then they dumped him months later. So there definitely another chapter was necessary.
Yeah.
The previous ending was upbeat. I mean, the hell, they just went to the finals.
Yeah.
And so people who buy the books that don't have that final chapter, you can go to my X account. There's a link that's pinned to the top where you'll get the thing sent to you PDF, and then it's in the audio book. It's in the if you're a Kindle reader and all that. But little plot twist at the end.
Yeah, just a small one. It's been a wild ride for you with the Mavs. So, you obviously have a history with Mark Cuban. You
Mhm.
report tough stuff, and Cuban revoked your credentials. Jason Kidd has called you out. I mean, I don't want to say it's a badge of honor, but it means you're doing something right. Obviously. How would you characterize the Mavs organization going from Cuban to the new ownership, and then Nico Harrison?
So, Nico was hired by Cuban, and then once the new owners came in, Nico did a very effective job of boxing out Cuban, certainly much better than the Lakers did against Rudy Gobert last night. Completely boxed Cuban out of basketball operations, where, when Cuban sold the franchise, he still owns 27%, but when he gave up the majority control, the controlling share of the franchise, he told everybody who would listen, "Hey, I'm still in charge of basketball operations." There was never any language like that in the contract. There was not language like that removed from the contract. I was told there was language removed that basically said he would be allowed to continue to be involved, but nothing about control. I don't know if Cuban was trying to speak it into existence or bully his way into it happening, or just, flat out not telling the truth, which he'll do from time to time. But he went from running the show to having no more juice than any other courtside season ticket holder, just like that. And Nico successfully convinced Patrick Dumont, the new governor, kind of the face of the new ownership group, that hey, I know what I'm doing. I got us to the finals last year. Listen to me. My voice is all you need to hear. And I would say that completely backfired on the Mavericks. And Patrick Dumont now has realized there needs to be checks and balances. Nico Harrison, I believe, will have at least one more year as the Mavericks general manager. I would say that the seat has gotten warm at least, and the "in Nico we trust" era was very brief.
Yeah, let's be real, Tim. He got a little lucky. The trade for Kyrie did not work out initially. They had to tank to keep their pick, but then it turned into Lively. he trades
Mhm.
for PJ Washington and Gafford, and those all
Yeah.
hit and they go to the final. So he looks like a genius. And now he kind of looks like a dope, but there are segments of the NBA Twitter, whatever that's called,
Mhm.
that are like, hey, man, Nico was right. Luka doesn't play D. But like, I'm not buying that crap. I'm just curious, how ugly did it get for Luka and Nico in the weeks leading up to the end for Luka?
Yeah, I certainly covered this some in that final chapter. I also wrote about it recently on ESPN.com. Their relationship at best was frigid.
Ooh,
And it really does go back to you can say the root of it was Luka's conditioning concerns.
yeah.
And if you're looking at it from Nico's perspective, you could say that caused Nico to make some of the personnel decisions he made with behind the scenes
Mm,
staffers. But he ran out people that Luka knew, liked, trusted, and respected. And these are people who were with Luka the entire time he was in Dallas, helped him make this massive cultural transition. And again, it's not people that are household names, but Casey Smith, who ran their health and performance group, one of the most respected people in the athletic training industry. Was is now with the New York Knicks running their group. Jeremy Holsapple, a guy who won the NBA Strength Coach of the Year award a few years ago. Casey Spangler, a massage therapist. In a related move, it was his decision, but Scott Tomlin, their longtime VP in charge of the PR group,
mm,
he left to go work for Dirk Nowitzki. By the way, Dirk, the way
yeah.
that Casey Smith got fired, that led to Dirk basically saying, I don't want anything to do with this organization. Like, I'm not going to badmouth them, but I'm not going to be involved. And he's done for the time being as far as being any sort of
Mm,
ambassador for the Mavericks. So you Nico really kind of isolated Luka and made it an adversarial situation with Luka's quote unquote body team. And the Mavs staffers, Nico's guys is the way that they are perceived within the building and certainly by Luka and Luka's camp. And it led to a lot of friction. It led to, a lot of I would say passive aggressiveness more than anything. It's not like they were
mm.
yelling and screaming in each other's face. Luka just wasn't really speaking to Nico, and the communication between Nico and his hires and Luka's camp was tense, was usually unproductive. Having said all that, Luka fully planned to sign the Supermax this summer. He fully planned to spend the rest of his career in
Yeah,
Dallas. I can't say this with 100% certainty, but my educated guess is Luka felt like, I'll be here a lot longer than Nico will be.
yeah.
And he was wrong.
So we see this in politics, music, high level NBA players. Everybody surrounds himself with yes men. Don't tell me what I don't want to hear, right? It sounds like the way Nico was gutting all of Dirk's guys, Cuban's guys, Luca's guys, that he just wanted his own people there. Hey, I know Kyrie from back in the day. I know AD. Let me get in these known quantities who aren't going to really challenge me. Would you say that's a fair assumption for Nico?
That's certainly the perception within the building, and that's absolutely the perception from Luca's camp. And you look at the way that Nico has built this roster, there definitely is a tendency towards going with guys, with players who he has known since they were teenagers. His relation, and Nico, for people who don't know, a long time Nike executive, was the VP running North American basketball operations for Nike for years, and so was very involved with the grassroots basketball scene. And he had a relationship with Kyrie dating back to when Kyrie was a teenager. Same thing with PJ Washington. Same
Oh,
thing with Anthony Davis. And look, I think if you are evaluating the job that Nico has done as a general manager of the Mavericks, one, it's muddy before Cuban sold the controlling share because Cuban was the general manager, right? And how, which decisions were Nico's? Did Nico really have say on? Which weren't? That gets pretty dicey. But he did succeed in building a finals team around Luka Doncic. That was the mission, to build a contender around Luka. He succeeded in that right up until beginning of February this year. I think you would have to give Nico credit and say, hey, this has been a success. He's done what he was brought in here to do. But the logic of this deal really falls apart in a lot of different ways. And the one that I've asked Nico, I pressed Nico on, and he just goes back to defense wins championships, which doesn't explain this decision. is in building this team around Luka that went to the finals before he hit his prime. You gave up your draft capital either outright or via swaps, 27, 28, 29, and 30. You put together a team that, in Nico's own words, has a 3 to 4 year time frame. That runs right to when the credit card bills due, and then you're screwed.
Yeah.
And I've asked him for his logic on that, how that's in the long-term best interest. And again, he just goes back to defense wins championships. In his mind, he put together a championship caliber team. We saw it for 2.5 quarters, as he says, which, yeah, they look great for 2.5 quarters before AD went down against the Rockets, but it's a hard sell,
Yeah.
especially for the fans. Look, there's obviously emotional attachment to Luka, and that goes back to taking the torch from Dirk and all that.
Mhm.
But these fans also just watched Luka take this team, this franchise
Yeah.
to a finals last year. So it's a hard sell to tell them
Yeah.
he did it at 25. He can't do it again for the rest of his career.
We'll get to Luca and maybe fat Luca with the Lakers, but I am curious. You watched him his entire career in Dallas.
Mhm.
I saw a stat that he only had 2 dunks this season, whereas he had like 39 last year or whatever the number was. Um, I guess there's no other way to ask this. Like, what's the deal with the weight gain?
Well, and look, that it's not new, right? I mean, if you go back to the pre-draft concerns, how the hell did 3 teams pass on this guy? Are you kidding me? EuroLeague MVP, EuroLeague Final Four MVP, the most accomplished team prospect in European history, if not international basketball history. The conditioning concerns have existed. They existed then, and they've continued throughout the course of his career. Those have been constant. At the same time, he's been a 5 time first team All NBA selection
Yeah.
in his prime. At the same time, the guy averaged 34, 10, and 9 for a team that went to the finals last year. So, he was never a high flyer. He is a highlight machine, despite the fact that he's not a high flyer. But the condition is absolutely a
Hmm.
concern, and it has been. It continues to be. I think it's tough to tell a guy because think about it. He came in his rookie year. He's putting up teenage numbers. Nobody else that age, other than LeBron, had put up those kind of numbers. The very next year, before we can buy a beer legally in America, he's an MVP candidate, and that's
Yeah.
continued, right up until this year, which is the first time that he's had really extended injury absences. So it's been hard to say, dude, your way's not working because it did work.
Yeah.
Now, is there more meat on the bone, so to speak? Like, is there more potential to be had? Yeah, there is. And it does get back to that conditioning. And look, if he's not going to really buy, and there's been times, there's been a summer here, a summer there, where he has really committed to it. If he's not going to do that on a regular basis after being slapped in the face by this trade and this first round exit, then he probably never will.
Yeah, I mean, you remember Shaq had weight issues with the Lakers. Kobe would get on his case about coming to camp out of shape. I am curious, in your reporting on Luca's background, there's no deft way to ask this, but like, does he come from a big boned family or is everybody overweight? Like, it does feel like when you look at highlights from, remember the Clippers when he would just destroy them in the first round by himself and they would lose in
Mhm.
6 or 7? It looked like 20 pounds lighter. No?
Yeah, no, he's definitely uh beefed up since early in his career. He was listed at 230 as a rookie. I don't think he was ever, maybe he was 235. I'm
Okay.
not even sure about that. His weight, he plays often in the 250s, sometimes in the 260s. The
Yeah.
260s is when it really gets alarming. But yeah, his dad, who is a Slovenian basketball, his dad's kind of the Charles Barkley of Slovenia, just to
Oh.
just to give you an idea. Um, where he was a multi-time All-Star in the Adriatic League, which is their league over there. Um, but he's a guy who, if you talk to people in the Slovenian basketball circles, they're like, yeah, he was really good. Man, he could have been a lot better. And it's the same thing. Like the guy likes to
Uh,
eat. He liked it. Like the way I put it in the book is he's a guy, Sasha is his dad, a big gregarious personality, like Barkley. But he's a guy who everybody in Slovenia wants to have a beer with, or
mhm.
or a glass of wine, and a great many have succeeded. Like he had a pub down by the Ljubljana train station late in his career, and he would have nagging injuries that would cause him to miss road trips,
Mm.
and it wouldn't be hard to find on those road
Oh,
trips.
jeez.
So, but and his dad is like he's a big framed guy. And again, like there were conditioning concerns with him throughout the course of his career. It's been the same thing with Luka. Now, I will say part of the reason he's been able to be so dominant is because of that big body. Because I mean, he's a strong dude. Like as much as you'd like him to commit to conditioning more than he does, if you ask guys who've been in the weight room with him or ask like the Mavs strength and conditioning coaches, like what's Luka like in the weight room? As far as like the leg strength, I mean, he is top of the charts and he moves people. He's hard. One reason he's so damn hard to guard is because he's stronger than pretty much every wing defender in the league, and he can
Wow.
move him, he can move him where he wants him to go. Now, 245, he could do that.
Mm.
That'd be a great weight for him. If Luka really commits and gets himself in peak shape, he's probably going to be 245.
Mm.
Again, he plays in the 250s on a regular basis. It's gotten up into the 260s, in the high 260s, I was told earlier this year.
That's like
So,
defensive end.
well, what I would always say is there have certainly been times he looks more like a pulling guard for the Dallas Cowboys than a point
Pulling
guard for the
guard.
Dallas Mavericks.
Jeez, that's harsh. So I happen to hoop with a guy out here in LA who um, knows Rick Carlisle a little bit, and apparently during Luca's first year, was Dennis Smith there? His first
Yep.
year, Luca's
Early
first
on
year.
for the first half.
Yeah. So apparently there was some major beef between Carlisle and Smith, and it was about Luka Doncic. Do you cover any of that in the book, or what
I
went down between those guys?
I get into a lot of it, and I would push back on it being about Luka Doncic.
Oh,
It was about Rick Carlisle did not believe in Dennis Smith Jr.
well,
And that was
understandable.
something that was something Rick was out on Dennis by midway through Dennis's rookie year.
Yeah.
When the Mavs were tanking to try to get Luka and all that, but Rick had decided this guy's not only is he not a franchise player, like he's not a player that I want.
Yeah.
And I get into a meeting. It was literally 1 week into Luka's career. They were 2-2 at the time, but they'd just blown a 26-point lead in Atlanta. And, terrible loss, TNT game, Luka versus Trey Young,
Oh,
so
that's right. Yeah.
right behind it. Get on the plane, they go to Toronto. They've got a game a couple of days later. And it's just your typical next day film session team meeting in the Ritz-Carlton ballroom in Toronto. And Rick is just furious. And he's like just getting madder and madder and madder. And like you can see the veins popping out of his forehead and through his bald head. And that was the meeting where he called Dennis Smith Jr. out in front of the whole team. You're jealous of Luka. And Dennis is like, bro, like he looks at Luka. He's like, are we good? Luka's like, yeah. Like the basketball fit, they were a bad basketball
Yeah.
fit.
Yeah.
But Dennis was not like he was trying
Hmm.
to be like a good teammate and a friend. And they're still buddies to this day. Like Dennis came to Luka's first press conference. They lived in the same building, and Dennis is like, dude, I'll show you around. Like, hang out with me. It was Dorian Finney-Smith and Dennis were really tight. So it was like,
Oh,
hang out with me and Dodo. Like Dennis was like, dude, I don't even like Fortnite, but I'd play it because that's what he wanted to do.
right.
And so there was definitely like Rick tried to make it about Luka. Dennis had no issues with Luka. Luka had no issues with Dennis. Like the basketball fit wasn't there, but whatever. They were fine. Rick tried to make it about Luka when his Rick had a problem with Dennis because he
Yeah.
didn't believe in him. And I
Um,
would say this, you can definitely say, hey, Rick's player evaluation was on point, but his approach was dead wrong.
right. Yeah.
And that meeting got worse and worse and worse to the point where Rick lost the locker room in that meeting. Again, a
Yeah.
week into Luka's career, he cracked the foundation. Forget like that locker room. He cracked the foundation of his relationship with Luka 1 week into his career with that team meeting.
Not great. I am curious, like this Kyrie Irving injury, the Mavs next year. Is there any world where they're a playoff team next year? I mean, it sounds like Kyrie's probably out until the All-Star break, January
Well,
at best. I don't know.
yeah, I mean, his goal is to get back in January. I think you've got to give him some grace if he doesn't
Mm.
reach that goal coming off a torn ACL at the age of 33. He's going to miss somewhere around half the season. And then, uh, is he going to be like, is he going to be back to himself at any point next season? It's asking a lot out of a guy that age coming off of that sort of injury. But
Mm.
look, is there a world where they're a playoff team? Yeah. They've got to find a stopgap creator for sure. And I don't, I'm just throwing this name out off the top of my head. This isn't like a source name, but like a guy like a Dennis Schroeder, right?
Mm.
Like a veteran who there might not be a big free agency market for, but hey, if you put the ball in this guy's hands,
Yeah,
like
he
he's
can.
going to be able to generate some offense. He's going to be able to score. And Nico's thing is you can't judge this yet because of the injuries. I think you're going to be able to say that at the end of next year, though, because Kyrie is such a huge part of this thing.
Yeah.
And like, how are you going to say, hey, you get the full version of Kyrie Irving coming off a torn ACL that's going to cause him to miss at least the first 30 or so games.
Mm. Yeah, not
But
not
hey,
ideal for Dallas.
listen, if Anthony Davis can stay healthy, which is obviously has been,
If
if Derek Lively can stay healthy, which has been a challenge, I'm curious to see if Daniel Gafford is back for the last year of his contract, or if he's a guy that's moved in the summer trade
Mm.
market. But they will have a big, athletic defensive front court. Um, like I understand the vision, but they've got to get a guard who can generate offense in there.
It's probably not Supermax Christie, but although I like him, I just don't know that he's the guy. Let me ask you, I don't want to try to make this a thing, but Luka and LeBron did not seem to be like communicating a lot at the end of the Minnesota series, the last two games. During the season, my buddy has season tickets. We would go to games and you
Mm.
could watch, and they were like, I didn't totally see that. And I wonder, this is just speculation. Do you think there's a world where LeBron is watching the film the way Carlisle did? And it's just like, man, this guy's out of shape. He ain't boxing out. He's not getting back. I just wonder, LeBron, we know is like a crazy person when it comes to working out, massages, eating right. Do you think there could be friction over this?
I'm not around that. I have not been around that team on a regular basis. I think I've seen them play 4 games in person since the trade. I just don't want to put myself in a position where I'm speculating
Yeah. Okay.
on that kind of drama. The one thing I will say is LeBron, since Luka's rookie year, has been a huge fan of the guy's game. Like there is a ton, and Luka grew up like LeBron was his NBA idol. If you ask him his idol, he'll tell you this guy Vanilla Spanoulis, I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly, who's like this EuroLeague legend
Oh, okay.
and LeBron James. LeBron was the guy who he watched like the highlights of and all that stuff growing up in Slovenia and then when he went over to Spain. And I know that LeBron very quickly kind of embraced Luka as his peer in terms of talent.
Hmm.
I mean, one of the chapter titles in my book is "A Bad Motherfucker," and that is a direct quote from LeBron in a game very early in Luka's second year, and it was a moment where Luka put up bonkers numbers, LeBron put up bonkers numbers. The Lakers win, but they're dapping each other up post game. The ESPN cameras caught it, and LeBron said, "You a bad motherfucker." And if LeBron ain't just telling that to everybody. He's telling that to Luka at the age of, I believe Luka was still a teenager at the time.
Hmm.
Um, so again, there's definitely respect there, in terms of what LeBron has thought of Luka's performance or Luka's conditioning or effort and all that. I would just be guessing, and I don't want to put
Mhm.
myself
Yeah,
in.
I only brought it up because LeBron's handpicked every guy that he's his wingman throughout his career. He didn't handpick this one, the best we can tell. So
Well,
I
the
just
other the other thing there is LeBron's the wingman now.
yes,
I mean, let's just be real.
yeah,
And that's no not hey, LeBron is going to be an all NBA player this year at the age of 40, which is
yeah,
insane.
it's insane.
But Luke is the guy who that franchise is going to revolve around for the next decade or so.
Yeah. When you approached Luca about the book, I'm curious, how did he take it? Was he open to this? Did he want to meet with you a lot? Was he just like, hey, do whatever, I'm not involved? Like, how did that go down?
I didn't approach him about it,
Oh,
and I didn't anticipate any cooperation from him, and that was fine. And again, that's why I didn't approach it as like some pure biography. One, I think it's premature for like just a
Yeah.
biography on a guy, right? But that's why I try to approach it on the pressure on a franchise when you draft a prodigy through the prism of Luka and the Mavericks. And this was a few years ago that I started the project. There already being all kinds of twists and turns and drama and dysfunction and chaos and success. And that obviously continued over the next few years. But Luka didn't he wasn't fond of it. And actually when I went to Slovenia and then followed his team, his national team in Germany for group play of Eurobasket in summer 22, he didn't make eye contact with me the whole trip. which,
What?
which wasn't necessarily unusual. Luke was, especially at that point, was not one who, and look, we butted heads.
Right.
Mavericks fans
I
think I'm
remember that.
a
And yeah.
hater and all that kind of silly stuff, but which is fine. Um, Now he didn't. Once I talked to people in his camp, his agent Bill Duffy, his business manager Laura Bessager, and said, "Listen, I'm not digging into like Luca's private life or his personal life. That's off limits. This is a book about basketball and the business of basketball."
Mhm.
He at least was okay with it
Okay.
in the sense of like there wasn't like not that we never butted heads again, but like the book wasn't like some big adversarial issue
Right.
between us. And his voice is in there plenty. He never sat down with me specifically for the book, but obviously I've covered the guy's entire
Yeah. Yeah.
career. So his voice is in there plenty.
And it seems like there's no sordid Luca off the court stuff. Like Anthony Edwards is out here knocking up all these Instagram influencers, and Zion's got whatever he's got going on with adult film stars. But Luca seems, and again, you know him way better. He seems like kind of a clean cut dude who is easy to root for, maybe.
I would say Mavericks fans certainly found him easy to root for. I think Lakers fans are as well. Yeah, Luca has not created any sort of a scandal off the court.
Yeah.
That I am comfortable saying.
We could wrap up with this, Tim. Over under 1.5 titles for Luca in his NBA career. We don't know what the injuries or how the body's going to hold up into his 30s. Probably won't be playing at 40 like LeBron. But I'm just you're. I think he's one of the best players in the world, if not the best. Although right now that's tough to say. But I'll set it at 1.5.
That's a good over-under. I set the over-under at his MVPs at 1.5 after his rookie year. I would still take the over on that.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and again, I think a lot of this does come down to what kind of commitment year round, 24 hours a day, not just conditioning, but diet, lifestyle, is he willing to make? I think that his chances of winning championships improved with this trade.
Ooh.
And not immediately, right? Obviously, they got bounced in 5 games after we went to the finals the year before, but
Yeah.
it's not hard to attract talent to play for the Lakers in LA, right? So, for example, they have a glaring void for a rim running, rim protecting center.
Mhm.
Those type of players are going to be lining up trying to get to LA to play with Luka for the Lakers. Um, so I would take the over. Obviously, the Lakers franchise has a track record of being able to win with these sort of generational talents. Somehow they're able to keep getting these guys, even when,
Indeed.
like just delivered to them. But yeah, I would still take the over on that.
You mentioned Gafford earlier. I'm looking at his contract, so he's got one more year. I'm sure he would be itching to get back with Luca as opposed to be like the third banana behind Lively AD. But I don't know how the Lakers can get him. I mean, it's
Well,
just
there are definitely pathways. The question is, would Nico Harrison be willing to make another trade for the Lakers that
to
would
help.
greatly benefit
Yeah.
Luka Doncic? It would have to obviously be a win-win type of deal. But I'm that you mentioned, and that's not the first time that possibility has crossed my mind. By the way, with Gafford, Luka's been trying to recruit him to play for the Slovenian national team.
Wow.
You can become a naturalized citizen. They can have one naturalized citizen. It's always with Luke, it's always an American lob threat.
Hmm.
It hadn't been an
Interesting.
NBA American lob threat, but they have been. And Luca's dad, Sasha, is now running the Slovenian. Uh, like he's whatever I forget the exact title. Essentially, the GM for the Slovenian national
Hmm.
program. They've been trying to recruit Gafford to play with him there.
Wow, smart move by Luka. All right, the book is The Wonder Boy, Luka Doncic and the Curse of Greatness. Tim, hey, thanks a lot, man, for coming on, and hopefully I'll get invited to one of your pickup games and show you what I got.
You bet. Root for the Clippers. We'll definitely have a run out there. I
All
appreciate you, brother. Adios,
right.
amigo.